We want to have a conversation about alcohol, drugs, substance abuse in the country. And we have a guest who's joining us now in the studio. His name is Professor Yossi Harel-Fisch. Professor Yossi is a former chief scientist at the Israeli Drug Authority, but he's also very many things that he wears very many hats as well. Let me just read some of the things that he's done. Professor Yossi is the founding director of the International Research Center on Adolescent Well-Being and Health at the School of Education at Bar-Ilan University, and served for the past decade in the Israeli government as a chief scientist of the Israel Anti-Drug Authority. He's done a lot. Prof, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
We called that the hot seat of the Situation Room.
The hot seat. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm privileged to sit here.
Karibu sana. Your first or second time or third time in Kenya?
This is my second time in Kenya. I was here just before the pandemic broke out, but I've been working with my colleagues here in Kenya since then for the past 3 years very intensively on ideas and thoughts about how we can be helpful to establish a effective policy and strategy for the country to reduce the burden, enormous burden, both financially but mainly human burden of addiction in this society, based on the 4 decades of work that I've been involved in with my colleagues over Europe and other places in the globe. And we are here to help.
Good. You'll tell us all about that. To welcome you to the show,
thank you very much.
that gentleman called C.T. Muga gives us a day's proverb from
Burkina Faso. Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the country of Burkina Faso, the country of honest and upright men. Okay? That actually is the derivative from the name Burkina and then Faso. Every birth is a rebirth of an ancestor.
Every birth is a rebirth of an ancestor.
Yes.
Prof, does that make sense to you? That proverb? Every birth is a rebirth of an ancestor.
It not only it makes sense, but I think that our whole being here on earth is motivated by what we bring with us from home. And what we bring with us from home are the values and norms and maybe religion, but things that we received from our parents, from our grandparents, and from our ancestors. So yes, I'm a strong believer in the fact that a person is actually the manifestation of his ancestors, and our responsibility on earth is to take what we have been given and make the best out of it for the good of people.
Very well put.
I couldn't have put it any better. Yes. I mean, even from a scientific point of view, when you look at your genetic makeup, it's something you inherit.
Yep.
Yes.
That's true. Prof, tell us about yourself. What is it that you do and what have you been doing in this field of addiction?
Well, I was born in England. I moved to Israel with my family when I was only 5 years old, and grew up in Israel. But then I went out to do my academic studies, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and that's when I got caught into the whole area of childhood and adolescent well-being and health, looking at what is causing children to be happy, what is causing children to grow up and manifest their potential and go through this via dolorosa of childhood and adolescent years and come out at the other side with the tools that they need for adulthood. Basically, I'm an academician. I'm a researcher. I've been involved for 40 years with the World Health Organization doing a major study that's called the health behaviors in school-age children, today covering 60-odd countries in the world, where we put together the research teams and the best minds in the field of adolescent health. And we collect data from all these countries on representative samples of children and actually build the knowledge about what's happening in the daily life of children and use that knowledge to develop ideas for policy and for programs and for interventions to get people to get the children in a better place. Now, as a sociologist, and Siti, I know that you are also an academician and a scientist or researcher. As a sociologist in my background, you know, sociologists, when we do research, we all the time look for differences between people.
Mm-hmm.
Differences between men and women, differences between people from this background or that background, between different cultures and countries. And of course, we find differences from time to time. However, the biggest surprise again and again and again when I go out and do the research, and we've been doing research in all the continents in the world, excluding Antarctica, I think, but I've been out there, and I've been, over the years, I visited many countries, and I looked into the eyes of children, into the eyes of adolescents in all these places, and I looked at the data coming out of them. And the biggest surprise is not the difference between the children, but the similarity. Mm-hmm. The fact that a child is a child, and it doesn't matter where he lives, what religion or culture he comes from, what is the color of his skin, it doesn't matter. Children are the same. The same things cause them happiness. The same things harm them. The same things stop their ability to manifest their potential and go forward. It's not my. I mean, Mother Teresa said at the time that there's more hunger in the world for love and affection than for bread. And when you understand that a child, wherever he is, he needs to feel safe, he needs to be loved, he needs to know that there's a significant adult behind him that's always there for him and will always help him make the right decisions and go the right way. And children have to know that when they go to school, they're going to have a wonderful day, and no one is going to bully them, and no one is going to be disrespectful to them, and the teachers see him and understand him. These are basic needs that children need wherever they are. So over the years, with that knowledge, and I'm making it very shallow, but it has a lot of faces, a lot of dimensions, but with that knowledge, we were able to develop new models that are more effective in terms of managing to create change, to make the lives of children better. And those models have principles that if you do them, they might look differently in one culture compared to another culture, but it's the same principle. So if you understand that, you're able, and that's what we developed over the past 15 or 20 years, to go into new cultures and very slowly and modestly take the principles that you know, take the learning from success that you bring with you, learn the local culture together with your local partners, and tailor the strategy and the policy to be culturally sensitive and sensitive to the political system, to the government system, to the school system, which might be different from one place to another, and be able to evaluate it in a small pilot and then take it on and implement it in that country. And that is something that I've been invested in the last 15 years. To go around in countries where they did not yet build neither the scientific structure of monitoring and evaluating and building the data that provides you the ability to do evidence-based policy, and not just a policy because you decided that that's a nice thing to do, but that it's based on evidence and that you can be working with measurable objectives for achievement within the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and then you have your finger on the pulse, and you can work much better like that.
Right.
So we've been doing that in many countries. I've been working in China for many years now, and now we're working in the United Arab Emirates. I hope to be doing this here today, in Kenya, and it really puts the ability to influence, to impact an area like addiction, for example, much more effectively.
So what have you found in Kenya? I mean, you said that you go to different countries and seeing what they've been able to set up in terms of structure for protection of young people, and now that we're talking about addiction, drug and alcohol is a drug, but all right, looking across board, What have you found in Kenya that would look as though there were the gaps and it need proper structure to fill up?
Well, I'll say like that. First of all, I'm fascinated with Kenya. The population here is very, very interesting and very diverse and has many dimensions. But the first thing I found here, I understood, of course, that like in any other country in the world, you have an addiction problem that in some places might be more severe, in other subpopulations less severe, but it's there and it's severe. And we don't have the data. That's one of the things that we discovered, is that you don't have yet, to the best of my knowledge, there's no national data system that collects the data. Yet no one can tell me today what's the percentage of children in 10th grade or in 12th grade that binge drinking at least once a month.
Yeah.
You don't have that data. So this is a type of methodology that we can bring in here, and together with the researchers in the University of Nairobi, we're starting to talk about doing a pilot and developing that system. So that's one of the things I discovered. The other thing which is eye-opening is structures and the amount of fantastic professional people in the field. You have Nakada, of course, that has been doing a wonderful work in this field. You have APRAC, the non-government agency that is actually a body that brings together all the directors of about 240 treatment and rehabilitation centers across the country, and they work together and they think together and they share experiences, and the chairman Boniface is coordinating all of that together and working with Nakada and with the government. And for me, that is fantastic, because in many countries, especially in developing countries, you don't see that development already there. So you have people who are professionals with a lot of experience, and it makes me happy, because it means that when we start exploring the introduction of models that were successful in other places and tailoring it here, there's someone to work with. You're not starting to work by yourself. There's someone to work, and they are thirsty to receive that knowledge and to work with it. So I feel that within the next period of months, years, we can be very helpful in working with the local fantastic professional people and with these structures I talked about, and with the government, and starting to put together what is already existing here, but to harness it into models that work, and into a scientific evaluation system that will enable you to, as you go along, to see if you are effective. And wherever you're not affected, to do the changes needed till you manage to go to the success. So that's why I am very optimistic about what can be done here. And I met this week also with the second lady, the wife of the deputy president, and I was fascinated by her enthusiasm and her commitment to do whatever is needed for disadvantaged populations and for youth at risk and things like that. So and last time I was here, I met with His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, then Deputy President, today of course the President, and I heard from him the same attitude of compassion for the need to do this, and encouragement to continue to think about how to do it, and I know that we have the back of his office. So I'm very optimistic that we can really together boost up the ability to prevent, to treat, and do the proper rehabilitation that has to be done to those people who have been affected.
In the countries that you've worked in, can you tell us which ones have actually embraced some of these findings that research has brought to the fore, but more specifically, what it is about the findings and the manner in which it was presented that made them adopt it, and again, how well that worked?
Well, there's many examples like that. First of all, the 60 countries in Europe and North America have been doing this research work since the beginning of the 80s. We're celebrating in June 40 years of the health behavior in school-age children cross-national study that has basically become the backbone of of knowledge about daily lives of children that governments are using in order to implement programs and direct their policy. And there's enormous amount of examples, not only in addiction, in many other areas of well-being and of health, that countries took the data from HBSC, developed a policy and managed to show that they're doing a big difference, anything from nutrition through youth violence in school, bullying, and other well-being, many other examples. And in the last 3 years, it's the terrible impact of the COVID pandemic on the mental and behavioral well-being of children across the world. And we have been studying it, and today we have better tools. So one of the major revolutions that the data brought us to is the realization that most of the prevention approaches that were based on treating the pathology, finding what is the risk factors and trying to mend them, okay? Telling children, say no to drugs. You have to be not very clever to think that a child is using drugs because we forgot to tell him, say no to drugs. So why do you think if you come to a child's life and you tell him, say no to drugs, he will stop using them?
So then what are the reasons why?
So first of all, we know that all the programs that are dealing with the risk factors and trying to mend them, they might have a very short period of impact, but then they dissolve, and there's no maintenance, there's no sustainable impact. There's no real change that happens. When does a change happen? We discovered that when we did a meta-analysis of all the research that has been done for years on the determinants of these risk factors, the determinants of well-being, we found that the 4 main determinants that always surf up as in the research as the strongest predictors of patterns of behaviors and of mental health of the children, all the 4 of them are not risk factors, they are protective factors, they're resiliency factors, that the absence of them in the lives of children is causing the children to go to the wrong direction.
And what are those for?
Oh, you want already the solution?
Yes.
So I'll tell you the solution. But you have to realize that caused a 180-degree shift in the whole way of thinking and the whole way of doing things in our field.
So essentially,
and countries started to do it differently because I'll tell you what it's for. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I want to come. I want to ask a question differently, even as you come to that, because we're saying here that we're looking at ways in which you can now try to get younger people to have conversations about what's going on with them that would cause them to go towards drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
That's putting them in a very difficult situation, isn't it? So, and then now you're saying that there are 4 things, that the absence of these 4 things is what then is making them make the decision to go towards substance abuse. Now, I think that's where we're trying to go now. What are those 4 things, the absence of these 4 things?
I don't want to go directly to the 4 things because the most important thing to understand is what is the meaning of it. And then I'll tell you the 4 things. The meaning of it is that we have to think the other way around. What is our goal to see a child finishing his high school? Yeah. Do we want a child that is not violent, that is not using drugs, that doesn't do these risks? It's not enough. We want something much larger than that. We want a child that has the tools to continue on, is happy, is smiling, is got friends around him. We call that well-being. And when we discovered what we discovered, that it's not risk behaviors, violence is a symptom. Using drugs is a symptom. Those are not the problems. Those are the symptoms of the problem. The problem was the lack of well-being, the lack of total physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being of a person. By the way, that's the definition of health by the World Health Organization. A total condition of physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being of a person. And we took that as the well-being. If you manage to boost that up, to bring the well-being of a child up, he doesn't need drugs. He doesn't go there. So the question is not what conversation you have to do in order for the child to understand that he doesn't have to drugs. The goal is what can you do to build his alternatives in terms of behaviors. Instead of going out with his friends to drink, what alternatives can we build in the community, in the local authorities? What can we give him to boost up his resiliency and to boost up his well-being? And now I'll tell you the 4 things, and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. There's other determinants like that, but those 4 things really put you in the right direction of thinking and knowing what is missing here. The number 1 determinant of well-being of children is existing of a significant adult in his life. It can be a parent, it can be a teacher in school, it could be a mentor in the community, it can be his trainer in football. But someone who's there with unconditional love, that and I'm not talking about romantic love, I'm talking about compassion and acceptance and being there. Unconditionally, not because how you behave, but because when you woke up in the morning, you were you. That's all what you had to do in order for me to be there for you. I can dislike your behavior, I can dislike your clothes, I can dislike your friends, but I always like you, and I love you, and I see you, and I'm always there for you. A child that has significant adults like that in his life is protected, and he is much more lifted out and being able to deal with anything that comes along his way that day. The second determinant is a positive daily experience in school and in the community. Children go for 12 years to school day after day after day. And if they go to school and they feel that the teachers see them and care for them, and that they are respected, and that they have the efficacy to deal with the scholastic needs that they have to do, and they have a positive experience, they wake up in the morning and they go to school with a smile on the face. A child that doesn't have that every morning wakes up and goes to a place that he dislikes, that he doesn't feel that he belongs there, that he knows that he will be disrespected, and maybe also exposed to victimization from bullying and so on. Those children are in a very, very bad situation compared to those that have that positive experience. And the secret is that it's very easy for the adults in the educational system to give children the experience of a positive school experience. The very small things that you can do to give children the positive experience in school if you understand how important it is. The third determinant of well-being is the sense of self-worth. We found that out when we saw the children that are volunteering in the community, for example. They're doing much better than others because from giving, they receive back this sense of self-worth, especially if it's visible and their friends know about it and the community knows about it. And that is, again, something that's very easy to do. You take a child that you want to enhance his resiliency, and you give him a task in school, that task causes other kids to come to him to receive something. Or you have to be a bit creative. A child that gets praised for something, he doesn't have to be praised that he did fantastic in mathematics. He can be praised also because he helped one of the girls cross the street. I don't know, but it could be anything. But if he gets acknowledged for good things that he did, and I'll tell you the secret, the big secret that we discovered is that every child on earth, and it could be the most challenging child, every child on earth has at least one thing that is good at. At least one thing that is good at. So if he's the one that's doing the graffiti on the walls of the school, he knows how to paint and draw. If he's breaking into the computers and doing, he's good in computers. If he's a gang leader, he has leadership. So when we sit down with teachers and ask them to work on a specific child that is doing most of the problems in school, and after about half an hour that they're doing work on that child, we ask them, okay, now you have to identify one thing that is good at. Do you know what happens usually? They discover 3 or 4 things he's good at. They never saw it before because they didn't look for it. They were so much involved in combating his behavior that they never stopped a minute to see, okay, what's his talents? The minute you know what the talent of that child is, you can pick him up from there and enhance him through something that he does good, because the minute he'll do it, he'll be successful. He'll be successful, he'll be praised, so his sense of self-worth will go up. Fourth determinant of well-being. It makes sense so far, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense.
The fourth determinant of well-being is social connectedness with your peers. We are all social animals. Each of us, the adults, we have to know that we are popular among our closer circles of friends. We have the 2 or 3 friends that will always be there for you when you need them. Children, and especially adolescents, as they grow up from infancy up towards adolescence, the centrality of their social life becomes more and more central and more important for them. And children that feel popular among their friends, that feel that they're connected to their friends, they're doing with them activities, and it's a very significant part of their lives, they are resilient, they are up there, they know that whenever they need someone to talk to, they know exactly who that person is at 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever. Children that don't have that feel that they are excluded from the circles of friends they want to belong to, they are in enormous stress. And by the way, that's where, Siti, and you know that's where peer pressure kicks in. Because peer pressure, which is another universal phenomena anywhere in the world, including in stories of the Bible, with Joseph's brothers throwing him into the because they're challenging each other and so on. It's a peer pressure. Peer pressure in the adolescent's life is not an active verb. It's not something that your friends are doing and pressurizing you. That's not peer pressure. Peer pressure is a passive phenomena. It's your perception of what you think your friends expect you to behave. So that's why I'll go and drink alcohol, because I think my friends will think that I'm cool.
Yeah.
But that's not correct.
But they never told you.
No, it's a professor. This whole social connectedness, the minute if you're not connected, you have this desire to be connected, and then you do stupid things because you think that will make you more popular. But if you know how to do it correctly, it's a different way. So again, the significant adults are very important because they can identify a lack of social connectedness, and they can do little things to get to boost it up.
Let's take a break on that note. Very good. So those 4 points, we'll come back on them and now get deeper into them. Professor Yossi Harel-Fisch is a professor. He's very many things. Let's just say he's worked with the government of Israel and other governments. He's a chief scientist at the Israel Anti-Drugs Authority. He has been working with several stakeholders here in Kenya and seeing how can we reduce the burden of drugs and alcohol abuse in the country. And that's what we're discussing.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Professor Yossi Harel-Fisch. He is a social scientist, the director of International Research Program on Adolescent Wellbeing Health at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. He's also founding director of Wellbeing International Addiction Global Advisory Group. He has served as a chief scientist at the Israel Anti-Drugs Authority. He's here in the country working with several stakeholders on how research can help reduce the burden of drugs and alcohol abuse. City, you have very many questions.
Well, actually, most significantly, he is a grandfather.
He is a grandfather.
Yes, 12 grandchildren and counting. And the eldest of these grandchildren is 12. So,
absolutely.
Now, given what we've just been looking at, I can only surmise one thing. The professor is a fulfilled man.
Yes.
Because you are fulfilled.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But now, back to what we were looking at. Even as the professor was walking us through these 4 main determinants and patterns of behavior, I couldn't help but marvel that the very things that we relate the well-being of young people with or in are the same things you relate the well-being of adults. Same.
You took away my punchline. That's a big secret.
My apologies.
No, I love it. I love it. It's exactly true, because these are exactly the 4 determinants of well-being for us, and they might look different. I don't need a significant adult, but I need a significant other. Okay, I have to know 2 o'clock in the morning, I need help. I know exactly who will be there for me. I have to go to work and know that I'm going to a place where I feel belong there. I feel that I have that my bosses see me and are there for me if I need them. That I get the support I need. That I can do my work and excel in it. So that's the school environment. And then I want to feel self-worth, of course, and my social connectedness. If a person, it doesn't matter if he's 9 years old or 90 years old, when he wakes up in the morning and these 4 dimensions of his life are okay,
Fulfilled.
he has a great day. So what we have been learning over the past several years is how to enhance these determinants, how to identify people that don't have them, and especially I'm in the area of children, adolescents, and young adults. We didn't talk about that population, but it's a student age, which actually also serve as a role models for the adolescents in high school. So, how to identify and how to enhance these. So we're working with parents, we're working with teachers to give them the understanding and the tools, and it creates a fantastic change. It's amazing.
Yeah. If we look at it's interesting because looking at some things that have been put together over the last 2.5 years, especially after COVID, where everybody was, more or less locked up and you had to stay indoors. We've seen significant in Kenya that the cases of drug and alcohol abuse in younger people have risen significantly. Now, if you were to apply this, what you've talked about this morning, and you started from the end, would you unequivocally say that those who then have a drug problem have one or more of these determinants or lack of them present in their situation?
Most likely, yes. But it's the story is slightly more complicated than that. Most likely, yes. But what usually I will be focused on is not what is missing in their life, but what can I do in order to enhance those 4. If I see children drifting into drug use, that means that something is not yet perfect in the family culture that they come from, in the support of their parents. Again, it all depends on the age of the child. So I'll go and try to see where can we enhance those determinants in order to stop the deterioration into drug addiction, into alcohol addiction. I'll tell you the story of alcohol with COVID, and this is findings from the HBC study in all of Europe, including in my own country in Israel. We collected data in 2019, just before the pandemic broke up. So we have baseline data to compare. Then in 2021, 1.5 years into the pandemic, we collected data again from the children. And then a year later, at May, June of 22, when the children were already a full year inside the schools, back in school, we collected data again. And what we found was amazing with alcohol. We found that the rate of binge drinking between 2019 to 21 to the pandemic went down very significantly, almost vanished. And in 22, it went back up again to about 3 times higher than what it was before the pandemic. It just sprung up. Why? Because in most of the societies, alcoholism is not the problem of youth. That's not the problem. Adult person who is drinking and becoming alcoholic, he drinks when no one sees him at home. It's a different behavior. The youth, it's a social drinking. They go out to party with their friends. They go out to socialize at night, and they go to places, they bring booze with them, or they go to places where they can drink. Now, if everybody's closed down at home, and the community is shut down, and all the places where you go to party are shut down, and you don't see your friends because there's a curfew, so you don't go out to party. You don't go out to party. You don't drink. So where we've seen most countries there's an increase in alcohol sales during the pandemic, it's because adults were drinking. not because of the children. And when I saw those data in 21, I was yelling and shouting at the Israeli government corridors and in the parliament. I said, guys, this is not good news that it went down. It's very bad news, because what it means is that the minute the community will open up and the kids will be released from being in home, they will have a boomerang effect, and they'll just go out there and go straight back into the arms of socialization with alcohol.
So what did you
and
want
if
the
we
government-
don't do something to prevent it, now it will be too late. And of course, the wheels go very slow, and they didn't.
What did you want them to do?
Well,
at
that's
that
what
point?
we're doing now, and we're learning from success, and it goes back also to one of your questions about which country succeeded, and I'll tell you that story. We have to learn together with the children how to influence fun instead of seeking all the time fun under the influence. We have to understand that you can have fun without needing alcohol or drugs or any other substance. We are raising new generations of children that think that anything they want to achieve in life, they need a substance to help them achieve it. They want to be relaxed, they need a cigarette. They want to concentrate on the exam, they need to take Ritalin. They want to have the courage to go to the beautiful young lady, or if it's a lady, to go to that beautiful boy and start with them and try to do something. So they have to drink alcohol to get the courage. If they want to party and have fun with their friends, they need a joint. And I'm telling the kids all over the world, learn from Nike. You are going around with T-shirts of Nike. You're going around with jogging shoes of Nike. What is Nike's slogan?
Just do it.
Yeah. You want to do something, just do it. You don't need any substance to achieve it. Just do it. And when that sinks in, that's a realization, number one. Number two, it's not enough. Every beginning parent knows that if you all the time tell your child, don't do this and don't do that, nothing changes if you don't build alternative. If you don't teach the child or help the child understand what to do instead. Adolescents need to socialize. They need to be with their friends. They need to feel excited. You have to build alternative way of socializing and having fun. And that's the responsibility of the family, but of the community and the local authority to develop the alternatives. And the alternatives in the non-formal education system in the community, going out there to do sports and doing soccer and doing tennis or whatever, going out there to classes of arts and music and youth clubs and youth movements, volunteering in the community. The idea is to structure the leisure time of children. Structure the leisure time of children, because the biggest problem is boredom. If during that leisure time, when they come back from school till they go to sleep, there's windows of boredom, that's where all the problems happen. So if you are able to build a structure for the leisure time, together with partnership with the parents, partnership with the community, that's the way to go. It's a positive psychology, proactive approach. It's not a reactive approach. I'm a big fan of proactivity. We don't have to wait there till something happens and then you have to react to it. Be clever, go out there and start, and that's what I meant when I told the Israeli government, this is bad news, we have to start doing something to prevent it, and they didn't do it, and that's what happened. And now we're doing it, but it's not too late, of course, but we could have done it earlier. Now, what is the example of the country that succeeded? Iceland. Iceland was about 10 years ago, they were always at the top of the list of risk compared to all the other countries in Europe. The children were drunk, the rates of drunkenness, the rates of bullying at school, the rates of mental distress, the rates of drug abuse and going away from running away from school and so on. They were always at the top of the chart, number one or number two, worse compared to all the other countries, till the government decided to do something about it. And they took those principles of the positive psychology. The model that I developed is called youth resiliency, and it's based on those 4 factors I talked about before. And we over the years, we translated the conceptual model into a intervention strategy, and we're working with that all over the world. They took some of those principles and principles from other models in positive psychology, and they did a fantastic thing. First of all, they harnessed the parents. They did a lot of explaining, through the radio shows and television shows, and sending parents information. But then they harnessed the parents. Parents had to sign a charter where they are committing themselves to do something like 10 things, including one parent has to be at home when the child comes back from school. From 4 till 8 o'clock, a parent has to be at home. You have to do everything in your power to explain to the children how dangerous it is to use alcohol and drugs, and make sure that they don't use it. And one of the main things is structure the child's leisure time activity. And the government subsidized, I think it was something like $500 for each family, depending on how many children, to money that's colored to use to pay for the extracurricular activities. So if they register them for music class, so they have money from the government to help them subsidizing. And the government subsidized the organizations that are doing these activities. From both sides, they subsidize. So they put in a lot of money to help this happen. And children started to go to all these activities, and their life was structured. They had something that in some countries you can't do. They put a curfew that from 11 o'clock at night, and in the summer it's 12 o'clock at night, children have to be inside the home. Doesn't have to be their home, but they mustn't be outside, and so on and so forth. They put in funding, a commitment, leadership, but the most important thing is working with teachers and parents, and working with the children themselves on building the alternative, so that the need to go and seek alcohol and drugs just resolved away. Within 6 years, they became one of the best countries in Europe in terms of the rates.
Professor, there's something I need to understand here. The story of Iceland, I understand. They were at the precipice. They saw disaster. They could see it. There was no running away from it. How do you get to convince governments who are heading there, haven't quite gotten there? The signs are there. How do you get them to see? Because it is far easier at that level, when they can see the problem but it hasn't become a disaster, to mitigate, than when it actually now becomes a full-blown disaster. How do you get them to understand this?
3 ways.
Yes.
Number one, health behavior in school-age children survey system that will collect the data, so I can come to the government and say, this is your picture. This is what's happening today. And even more so, in 2 years' time, I can show them what are the trends. If it's going up, going down, what are the trends? So when they see suddenly the data and they see what the situation is, and I can compare it to 60 odd countries in the world, and I can choose from the countries that are most similar to this country, and you suddenly see how you're doing compared to other countries that have started to do the work. So first of all is the data. Today, you don't have in Kenya. I'm talking with officials here. No one is able to tell them what is the exact situation. They know from the problems that come to treatment, or the police come to know, but they don't know the real rates of what's happening in the population. So that's number one, is building the data system that will give you the information. Number two is the cost of the burden of drug and alcohol abuse. And we know how to calculate it. We've calculated in many countries, and one of the fantastic things is that almost all of the countries are moving around 5% of the gross national product annually. You know what 5% of your GNP in Kenya is? It's milliards of dollars. It's an enormous amount of money. So you're losing such a big chunk of your budget. And I'm talking only about national budget. I'm not talking about social cost.
Yeah.
The cost for the families, the cost for the community, the cost for the patients themselves. I'm not talking about that. That's another issue. Only the cost that comes out from the taxpayers' pocket. 5% of the gross national productivity. So if a government realizes that, and realizes, and that's the third, that there are ways to reduce it. There are ways. We know how to reduce it. We know how to start reducing it. We know to go one step after another and start reducing, and we can translate that reduction to money. We know from all over the world that every dollar spent on prevention, on the average, is saving $10 from the cost of the burden. So calculate it. So it's not that you have to put a budget of, let's say, $200,000 to do a prevention program in school. Those $200,000, multiply them by 10, that is what you're saving. So if you work with decision makers to understand these three things, to see the data, to know that if you do A, B, C, D, that data will look differently in another 5 years and another 10 years. And all of that translates into a reduction in the cost of addiction. That usually is a motivation for decision makers to go down that path.
So in the case of Kenya in 2020, the president said, addressing the nation, said, we are having a mental health crisis. Established a task force. In fact, it was called the Task Force on Mental Health and Well-Being Towards Happiness and National Prosperity. That task force came back to the president with a report that showed the enormity of the mental health issues that we have in the country and said, in fact, declare this a national emergency of epidemic proportions. The government did not do that. How do you make this a government then move? Start to see, because all these things.
It's the same thing. If you can show the government a success of another country, especially if it's a neighboring country that did something and was successful, that is a very strong, compelling argument. But I just want to mention that mental health and addiction go together hand by hand. Yeah. This is comorbidity, and it goes both ways. Addiction is causing problems with mental health, and mental health is causing people to go to addiction. And we are not aware of, for example, in the workplace, people that are working under stress usually, many times will resort to substances to help them cope with the stress. And if we are not there in the workplace with structures that enable them to receive resources to cope with their stressors in a different way and in a more productive way, we are not helping them out. So it's all of that matrix of understanding that mental health and addiction go together, and you can do the same strategy. You don't have to have two different strategies. The strategy, for example, in China, they know that already. So the centers that are dealing with that are dealing with addiction and mental health together. And that's the most effective way to do it. So I think the people and the organizations that are dealing with mental health and those that are dealing with substance use and addiction, and by the way, there's other addictions, not only substance use, especially screen addiction after the pandemic. Kids were inside the screens for 2 years, and now we have difficulties getting them out of there. But if they work together hand by hand and understand this relationship, they can bring the resources together instead of each one spending different money, and do activities that are working on both of them.
Professor, thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing with us all these insights. Professor is a social scientist. He is a chief scientist at the Israeli Anti-Drugs Authority. Professor Yossi Harel-Fisch has been our guest. Keep it here for more conversations